Okay. I see the alcohol flowing already, sir.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to all the questions after. Well, as you can see on the display, the title of for today is Markov chains and other statistical password attacks. So basically, it's going to look at using Markov chains, explaining what a Markov chain is, where it originates from, and how we can use that in the hash cracking process. Then we're also going to discuss other statistical attack methods. We'll just cover briefly about how those work. And then we'll move on to 3 demos showing how we can integrate what we've learned from the Markov attacks and the statistical password attacks in our everyday requirement to crack passwords. And in the conclusion, we'll look at how to protect ourselves against these types of attacks, especially from the corporate side, from company entities, personally, and then also as the person who's cracking passwords, what we need to be on the lookout for when we're using these types of attacks. So as you can see on the screen there, my name is Dimitri Fusekis. On Freenode, you'll find me under the Nick Urapente. I get asked often where they come from. It's very simple. It's Klingon planet that they have a dilithium mine on, so put the 2 words together, that's where it comes from. I'm based in South Africa, work as a penetration tester, and I'm on Team Hashcat as well. So if we begin then, why statistics in passwords? And Peter touched quite well on certain points that we're going to discuss in his previous talk regarding this. And if you look at the world that we live in at the moment, we see that with us as humans in the middle, around us is all forms of different kinds of data which we could categorize different words, different statistics about. For example, the blue is the different countries a person may live in. Black is a company that they may work for. Then we've got the type of profession in the pink color, and then languages are in the what should be orange, looks a bit like a copper color here. So if we look at all of this, it's a broad sample of data. If I can tell you to use this to try and as your base to get data for a word list to crack a particular set of hashes, it's a very broad database. You could have practically anything in here, any language, any type of data in this list. So what we do is, to begin statistically analyzing the data, we need to focus in and we need to profile what it is that we're looking at. So what we do is we strip away everything that's not to do with the target. Okay, so in this case we're wanting to crack passwords or hashes for someone who meets these type of statistics here. So we can see that it is a doctor, USA is the country of origin, English is the preferred language, person's male, and the person may or may not work for a government institution. So now that we've got that, what becomes possible is that you can now look at the statistical analysis of different formats of data that this particular person or the website may have. So for example, if this was a website that the users were using, and we have hashes we want to recover from this website, we would want to statistically analyze all of that. So we will start with, for example, passwords based on ethical terms, passwords that may have complex English, because being a doctor means person's gone through university, the level of English they speak may be a bit higher. Passwords associated with male interests, for example, cars, personalized cars, maybe men's health, statistics like that. Passwords associated with government teams and projects, and because we know it's in the USA, we can then also look at passwords associated with government teams or projects in the USA. So now we have a targeted data sample, and if we continue from there, we now take statistics of the sample that we have collected. Now remember, we're not looking for patterns here, we're looking for statistics to create a word list from. So we're going to, for example, look at top medical terms. We'll work out statistics on what are the top medical terms which are used. Combine that with top interests to male, for example, health, personalized by cars, hardware, building, top government projects, top USA government terms. So we'll take lists of those and we will analyze them to find what are the top words or the top claims that come out of that we can then use for our statistical attack to compile our word list. Once we have that, we then have a lean targeted word list based on a statistical analysis of our target. Now, the reason we want to do that is because almost all passwords have some kind of identifiable order to them that can be made visible by applying a function or a statistic algorithm to that. So as I mentioned in the previous talk, there's no such thing as complete randomness where humans are concerned. We base our randomness on subconscious patterns that may be easily identifiable. So depending on who I am, when I want to think of a random password, certain things about my subconscious, about the person that makes me up, is going to be taken into account. For example, if anyone in this group here chose a random password, if all of us had to believe it to be a random password, because there's certain likeness to us, we're all maybe in the IT industry, we're all in the security industry, that already has changed what we would consider to be a random password as opposed to a farmer picking a random password as an example, or a builder choosing a random password. In his mind, it thinks differently, it works differently, so random is a different thing in his mind. And perfect entropy from human thinking is not possible. So there's no such thing as complete randomness in the human mind. Certainly when you take all humans and you group us all together on the planet, there's no such thing as perfect randomness in the way that we think. Most humans associate their password choices with something that is firmly established in their minds, from birth dates, social security numbers, company names, etc. So even when we're thinking random, we still base it on something in our minds. For example, the company I work for, I can then base a random password on that. It can be very long, but it still may contain words or at least some kind of enters in a pattern or in a range or sequence that is a telltale to maybe where I work, what my birth date is, what my social security number is, etc. And this is where it makes it easier for us to find statistics. This is why we can use statistical analysis to crack passwords, because of the fact that the way we think has certain kinds of patterns to it, and we can find statistics in those patterns. Smaller statistics-based word lists and attack methods are efficient and maximize hardware resources. So if you brute force attack a password, that's all good and well if it's a false algorithm, maybe a short password, but as it gets longer, you either have to throw much more hardware at it, or you have to start changing your approach. One way to change your approach is to use statistics-based word lists, which is customized for what you are targeting to recover. Statistics then turn a finite number of random possibilities into a fixed size and a manageable and enumerable possibility when it comes to cracking passwords. So now we're going to look at the first way we do that with the Markov chains. We're going to answer the question Markov who, what, and why. So firstly, his full name was Andrei Markov, for those of you that haven't been introduced to him before. He was a mathematician, the creator of Markov chains. He was born 14th of June 1856 in the country of Russia. Not too keen on shaving, as you can see. Definitely had no impact on his ability to do maths, though, because he's known as one of the foremost mathematicians. Studied at St. Petersburg University and died 20th of July 1922 in Russia. Now, Andrei Markov came up with many mathematical algorithms, many approaches. The one that we're interested in is the Markov chain. And it's defined as a random process between a finite or countable state that is memoryless. And if you look at a quick definition of what memoryless means, it's the process by which the next state depends only on the current state. So remember that the process by which the next state depends only on the current state. The previous state or events do not affect the future state. This is called the Markov property. So one way of explaining, and we'll have a look at a graphical way of explaining it, but one way you can think of how a Markov state works, or how the Markov chain works, is the drunken walk. I don't know if any of you have heard of the drunken walk. And maybe by this afternoon we'll have quite a few demonstrations how the drunken walk works. But if you look at a drunk person who's walking, what do you tend to do? He tends to sway from side to side, right? You can either go right, you can go left. Okay. Now, the next step he's going to take can either be right or it can be left. But that's very dependent on what? On the current state where he is now. The fact that he's done 10 steps before that is irrelevant, because Where he is now means that he can only go left and he can only go right. And that's why it's a memoryless process, because we don't take into account what has happened. The fact that he dropped means that he's going to go this way or he's going to go that way from the current position that he's in. So for example, let's say we have a list of words here that make up a sentence. Right? We have small kids like to play. And we need to find what the next one is. Now, how can we use Markov to help us answer that thing? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remember that because we're able to look at the current state, we're excluding the statistics right from here until here, because we're not interested in that. We're interested in what the current is to work out what the next is going to be. So if we look at statistics for the word play, statistically, words after play can be with, alone, long, together, for, or sometimes, right? So they're the candidates which could come after the word play. We're not interested in what's before it, because we're not looking at the context now, we're looking at the current. And if we look at the weighting, we see that a weighting of 10 applies to alone. So statistically, and that depends, of course, which dictionary and which language you generate your statistics in, statistically, the word alone would come after the word play. So by looking only at play, we would put the word alone there, giving us a sentence, small kids like to play alone. Right, so that is a very quick overview of how Markov will work for us. Other statistical attack methods that we have are a preposition-based Markov attack. That's something that the hashtag tool can do. And it's similar to what we just saw, the classic Markov, except this one is a bit more in-depth because, and its hit rate is very high because it not only looks at where we are currently in a particular word, but it takes into account what position we're in currently. So if we quickly swing back here to our sentence, preposition Markov would say, well, we're looking at the word play because that's the current. But when we load our statistics table for what we're going to predict comes after play, we're going to look at the fact that that is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth word in the sentence. So we load a Markov table based on when our word is in the fifth place. Okay, when it comes to passwords, obviously this happens on a character level. So if we take the word password and we have the S, right, we're not only looking what comes after S in Markov, we're also going to take the fact that S is the third letter in the word password, and we will customize our Markov chain to work with that. Right, so statistics table is used per position, not just a single table. So you don't have a single Markov table, you have multiple ones based on the position of the character. Right. Other statistical targets, statistical attack methods are to profile your target with website statistics. So generate statistics for your attack based on website content. Right? So look at the passwords that you want to recover. Now we're using the example that they come from a website. The passwords that you want to recover. Look at the website content. Analyze what is actually made up on the site. Because remember we said that humans tend to randomly create passwords based on what they work with, what they know, what's in their everyday lives. So profile your target and generate statistics that you can then plug into your Markov attack to work with that. So for example, we don't care that the word "and" is the most statistically used word in the English language based on that website because, well, the word "and", chances are it's in your base word list already. What we're interested in is the fact that this particular website has the word "SCADA systems" as the most used word, not in a common dictionary. So when you analyze the website, look for what is not common, what wouldn't be in the dictionary, or what users may have used to generate their secure password. So the first demo we're going to look at is Markov in a nutshell, just to how we generate Markov tables to use in a Markov attack. So I'm going to move over to the laptop over here. Is the one, yeah, microphone?
If you move back to the podium, they'll give me time to mute your mic, else we'll get back to you.
So first demo is what happens when using Markov chains with passwords, right? Let's switch out to a shell here. So it's going to be clear enough for you all to see it. So if we have a list of words, in this case, for demo 1.10. You have a list of words there that I've created. They have, based on common English language, in this case we have aeroplane, tomorrow, prediction, predicts, conflicted, rosemary, etc., etc. It comes from the English language, right? What we're going to do with that is we're going to generate a Markov table. So we're going to say, we've got a simple Python script that's going to generate the Markov for us, right? Now, notice what's interesting about what we've done here is that this is what's referred to as a two-gram Markov, because what's happening here is that we're taking two characters and we're doing our Markov chain off those two characters. So what we're saying is that if my current position is the letters B and O together, then statistically after B and O comes the letter X, right? Because from our word list that we just saw, box would be the letters in there. Now what's interesting is to look at the weighting that the Markov chain generates for us. Because if you look at the L and the I over here, you see that there can be a C and N, a C or a C. Now we want those duplicates because those are what's creating the weighting for us. So if our current letters in our sequence are L and I, we want to make the next guess that we're going to make, the next deviation from the current, to be the letter C, because that is the most common one from the word list that we looked at. We will try N, we're not going to ignore N because that is also a candidate, but we start with the ones that have the higher statistics first, right? So in this case it would be the letter C. If I just pause that a bit further up the screen, okay, there's some more examples about what we can see there. For example, the sequence, after the sequence N and T, in those words, we have a double R and an O. So if we saw N and T, we would then do an R after that. If we saw I and O, we would then do an N. Okay, N has got a weighting of 3 with nothing else, so obviously we would use the letter N in that case. Right, let's go back to our slide again. So the next thing now we're going to look at is hash cracking with the Markov chain, right? How we can use Markov to hash crack. How are we going to crack? And how we're going to do that is we're going to look at a vanilla brute force attack versus a Markov-based one. And obviously, the Markov attack changes depending on what your target is, depending on what words you're going to use. Whether, for example, you've brute force attacked 50% or 20% of your passwords and you're now going to run the Markov analysis on them, or whether you've actually profiled the website, generated the word list, and you're now going to run Markov through that instead. So in our case, we're going to take our words I showed you just now, those words there, and we're going to try and crack those, firstly with the brute force attack, and then with the Markov attack. And what I'll do is I'll get hashcrack to run for 60 seconds. We don't have too much time to make it very long. We will see based on the two approaches which one cracks the most for us. So let's go back to our screen here again. All right. Connection there. Right, so if you look here, we have our okay, so those, I generated them as SHA-512 so that give the machine some work to do, otherwise it'll finish too fast and we won't see what's happening. And we're going to try and crack those ones now. Obviously I've kept the GPUs to a minimum so it also slows us down a bit so we can see what this machine is doing. Right, so let's do a quick traditional brute force thing and see what happens here with these. So we're going to say, go back here, go to our hashcat. We're going to tell hashcat to do the attack, right? full screen. Let me just try and begin. And we'll brute force it with up to 12. Just make start from the beginning though, otherwise we're only going to do 12. So we'll let that run. Okay, so it's going to run for 60 seconds now. It's brute forcing the whole lowercase space of those words I showed you earlier. They're in chart 512. And let's see how many it finds now in a traditional brute force. There's 2 GPUs, as you can see, and they're running in brute force. So let's just give that 60 seconds. If you want to grab a very quick drink, you can actually do that. It'll be finished shortly. Okay. So we've got one so far, it's scrapped. The word gearbox, 2, 4, 6. So we're looking at about 7 characters that we're brute forcing now. Okay, and it's finished. So we got the one out of 17 there. It got the word gearbox, right? So 1, that's not too bad, we'll get 1 point for that. Now we're going to look at what happens with Markov. What we're going to do now is we're going to switch to the tool that can create our statistics for us. This is the hashtag stats generator. It's going to generate statistics for us like we saw in the previous example, but now we're not going to feed it the words that I'm trying to crack, because obviously then it's going to find them pretty quickly. So we're going to feed it 5,000 English words in the hope that it's going to learn and build the Markov chains for those words about what characters come after which. Then we'll run it again to see now how many we can brute force with the Markov chain. So instead of just brute forcing the entire character space, it'll still brute force, but it'll now pick its decisions, the next character based on the Markov chain. So we'll create with English.hcstat, and we will feed it 5,000 English words. Okay, I'll show you that file when it's done. Okay, so there we processed it. If you want to just have a look what's in those links there, just a bunch of words right from the English dictionary. So we created our hashtag statgen file. That's the statistics file we're going to use for the Markov attack. Alright, so let's go back to where? Now we're going to use a tool called stats processor in hashtag. The stats processor basically is going to do our brute force for us based on the Markov. It's going to do a Markov attack for us based on the statistics file that we're inputting. So we're going to say that we want SP64 to use stats file and give us again 12 words, right? So I'll just show you what the output is. I'm not going to let it run too long, it's too quick. Remember, we're going to plug this into OCL hashtag to do the brute force again. So basically, sample output is going to look something like that, as it's using the Markov chains to generate the candidates. And hopefully it will be solved. Right. So we're going to go back there. We're going to send that to OCL hashtag. I'm going to tell it what the hashtag is. And we run for 60 seconds. And the hash file is the same one we used earlier, which is demo1.hash. Okay, so let's give this 60 seconds again to run. So now OCL Hashcat is getting its input from stats processor, who's basically generating brute force from 12 characters, but using the statistics from those 5,000 English words to generate its output. So let's see how many we get now after 60 seconds. Okay, so we've got 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 4 are a brute force just by teaching it, using a Markov stats table of 5,000 English words. Again, still in brute force mode though, but instead of just guessing everything we could think of, we're now targeting it with the Markov chain. Right, so that's where it got to. So there we have the difference, 4 over 60 seconds versus 1 when we use the traditional brute force attack. Right. So we don't have time to do this demo. It's a pretty simple one though. Basically what we need to do here is we need to analyze websites for our target attack and generate efficient word lists. So what this is going to do is to take what is in the website, right? So you scrape the website, you get your words out, you filter them out, but then what you do is you stick them through the English dictionary and remove what is in the English dictionary because we don't care about that. We're looking for statistically what is the most common words associated with that site, so we can then profile the users and try and guess what they're doing. I'm just going to come back to the line over here. So having a look at...
Oh, you need to switch it.
Fine.
It's 12:02 though.
So the conclusion is perform attacks against your own company passwords, right? So it's something that's not common, we don't really hear about it much, but that helps you see what your statistics are. It helps you take the password policy and understand what the adherence is, because it isn't enough to say minimum 8 characters, mixed alphanumeric, but they're actually using something that can be easily statistically generated from analyzing your company. Educate the users. Effective password policies. So enforce words they cannot use. If you work for a SCADA company, you can't use the word SCADA. That has to be in your password policy. Right? And then finally, we'll just quickly come through these here. Brute force is not always the answer. Analyze your target statistics, profile them. This one's important. Don't be too happy with generating your Markov stats, because the further you go, the bigger your input, the more you're just going to be starting to create a general brute force attack versus the targeted Markov attack. Right, so that's the conclusion. I don't have time to take you